start straight away, if that's okay. Any welcome apologies?
Yeah, we recorded on the agenda apologies from Liz Stagely, but Karen joined us and she's not feeling particularly well. We've also got apologies from Phil Woodford and Ben Madden.
Any declaration of conflict of interest? No. Okay. Item 43 then, minutes of the Board of Directors meeting held on the 7th of June. Colleagues happy to approve the minutes? Yeah, thank you. And then I'll turn to the company secretary. Update on the action sheet, please, Paul.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. The action tracker has been reviewed. There's just three matters to draw your attention to. There was an action for Ali regarding midwifery advertisements, which has been addressed, dealt with. Richard agreed to undertake a further visit to the mortuary, and it's quite a lengthy response there from Richard. And then lastly, there was an action for me regarding kind of events with the PCB and the ICB. I've reached out to colleagues in the system and I've asked for that information when it's to hand.
Okay, colleagues, so we move on then to matters for consideration. We have a patient story this morning. Barry Rigg, welcome as always. Good to see you. I'll ask you to lead on it. I understand that Head Governor Lorraine Crossley-Close is going to speak on behalf of Mrs. R, but I'll pass the floor over to you.
Thank you. Hello and good morning. My name is Barry Rigg, Head of Patient Experience. So joining me today via the Teams link is Lorraine, our Head Governor. So together we collect patient and carer and family stories from a whole range of different sources. So today, Lorraine, our Head Governor, and Annette, our Patient Experience Lead, bring to you today a family story which will be of interest to you as we work towards our whole system flow model. The name of the patient has been anonymised at the request of the family. So the story has been already shared with the Patient Experience Group and the care groups to reflect on the family members' experience and to draw out the learning. So within your reference pack, there is a written narrative of the story and the associated wider actions that we've taken together as an organisation to address the identified learning points. I will now play a short clip recorded by Lorraine, which does include key elements of Mr. R's family experience.
Hello everybody, my name's Lorraine Crossley-Close and at the moment I'm the Head Governor at UHMBT. I'd like to tell you a story. This story involves an 89-year-old man who fell on a Tuesday and felt very, very sore, this ankle, by the time it got to Friday, and his wife took him to hospital. She took him to Westmoreland General and he sat in a chair there for quite some time, and it came to the fact that they were going to have to transfer him to Royal Lancaster for the simple reason they thought that his ankle needed surgery. He sat on a chair between WGH and RLI for about 29 hours. His wife wasn't allowed to go in the ambulance and was actually told no, or sit with him during his wait, which upset her greatly. Their daughter came over from Australia to reassure and support her mum. On the Saturday, Mr. R had not had any medication since his admission to WGH, so his wife went home to bring his medication back. On the Sunday, they were asked to visit him out of hours because his condition had deteriorated, and when his wife got there, she did actually say, was it because he wasn't having anything to drink? But she was informed that he was actually on nil by mouth because they thought they were going to have to do surgery. Surgery was then not possible at that time because of his deteriorating condition, and at this stage the family asked to take him home. This couldn't have been arranged because the ambulance couldn't take him home because of a boundary problem. The patient lived in North Yorkshire and he was in a Lancashire hospital. As well as that, there just wasn't any home care available or discharge care available. The nursing home, which was local to them, had no beds. And before they could actually get him home, Mr. R unfortunately died. His family feel that from breaking his ankle less than a week before and his death, they really feel that his final week was an awful waste of time. They want really this to be a learning curve, i.e. they want actually to think that he wasn't just Mrs. R's husband with a broken ankle. He was also a patient with pre-medical conditions of cancer and a deteriorating maculopathy, so much so he could have hardly seen a cup in front of him. They don't want to complain, they're not the complaining type, but I really feel as they felt that this should be a learning curve, and if we are going to actually be integrated, then integrated care means from when the patient requests it and not from when it can be available to anybody involved with it. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Lorraine. So just to triangulate the story, what Lorraine has articulated there is the family experience. So we asked Emma Fitton, our Associate Chief Nurse, to undertake a case note review on this patient. And obviously we don't want to share today all of Emma's findings, but Emma has pulled together a couple of points that we are happy to share here in the public board. So potentially an earlier placement on the trolley within the emergency department would have been beneficial to Mr. R. And that's if the department had the capacity to allow that. We haven't been able to identify the capacity there. We've undertaken a review of the seating within the subweight area of the emergency department. We also understand and feel we want to work towards ensuring clear communication to family members why surgery wasn't appropriate at that point in time. And the final point that Emma's asked us to look at and to share with you today is a review of terminology. When we use terminology like fast track to patients and families, we need to be clear about what that means in terms of the timeline to manage expectations. So Lorraine, thank you for bringing the story. An opportunity, Lorraine, if you want to contribute or to add something now. Thank you.
I don't want to contribute anything. It just, to me, it's something that we do have to look at in capacity and casualty areas, and communication again, you know, to relatives of what's actually going on. I do understand that the reason that she was told that she couldn't go in the ambulance was that we were actually at the end of the COVID episode, so therefore we still hadn't had a sort of restrictions lifted for relatives to go in the ambulance. So I do, and I have said that to her, and she really quite accepts that, although because of the outcome, it still upsets her.
Thank you, Lorraine. So within the reference pack, we've included the action plan, the action tracker, and the actions that have been complete. We've also referred the patient story to North West Ambulance for them to review from the patient family point of view in terms of not being able to join Mr. R on board in the ambulance. And North West Ambulance have reviewed, and like Lorraine said, it was as we were heading towards the end of the COVID pandemic. However, North West Ambulance have confirmed that family members will be very welcome, you know, on board, you know, today. So I now hand you back to the chair. Thank you.
Remiss of me to not ask the chief nurse to. But I'll just check if you need to add to the.
No, but I just want to sort of assure the board that from such stories we're finding a learning forum, and I think these are some of that can help.
Hey, colleagues.
I think as a clinician, the one thing that question I have in this is, was there clinically anything went on that was actually could have changed the outcome? Because this chap, although he had cancer, I don't know much more about that, but he broke his ankle and then a week later died. And to me as a clinician, that leaves me with the question, well, why did that actually happen? And was there anything preventable clinically? Because we heard that one question about, was it because he hadn't had anything to drink? But it does make me wonder, if there was all the waiting and they couldn't arrange to go home, but before all of that, did something happen that we could learn from and could have been done differently?
Jane, would you like to come in on it?
I'm sorry, I don't know a great deal about the medical conditions of the case, and I guess we've covered this from a family point of view rather than from an RCA. So I would agree that it would be something that we would want to look at as an incident in the first instance if we haven't already.
We'll take that into the.
So are we looking at this as an incident? Because the family didn't want to complain, they wanted us to learn from it, which is very, yeah, good of them really. But so the question is to look at the other side of things. Are we looking at this as an incident?
Yes, we're going to look at it as an incident, and we're going to look at, you know, that Emma has done, the missed opportunities, and what is it that we can learn as an organization to avoid, because this is one out of maybe a couple of other. So there is a bit of learning for us. So we'll pick it up as an incident.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
Richard.
Oh, Richard.
That's what Tabitha was going to say. We'll double check and see if it's already in the system. And if it isn't, we'll put it in the system.
Sarah?
Thank you. Look, I think it was a really sad story to read and to hear, actually, and obviously that was a really sad outcome for Mr. R and his family. I think I was looking for a bit of assurance around the action tracker which was provided as part of the patient story. It talks about actions being complete and business as usual process in place, but what I couldn't take from that was whether those processes were already in place and unfortunately they failed us on this occasion, or whether those have been changes that have been made since this occurred, and that we've got some sense of tracking to make sure, to try to ensure this doesn't happen again, albeit unfortunately incidents do happen.
That'll come in through the incident report that Richard alluded to. That will be looked at as part of that, I think. But I think probably we need to bring it back here so that you get assurance. Okay. Thank you for that. I've got Sakthi and then Karen.
So Karen must before me, Chair. Karen, I can go after you, Chair, if that's okay.
Yeah, that's fine. Karen.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Sakthi. Just two questions from me. The first is just really a concern. We've heard a lot about the investigation and the processes, but have we spoken to this family? Has somebody met the family and talked to them? Is the first one, and the second is there? I can't see anything in the action tracker, and Emma, it may have been picked up in a wider investigation. It just seems that this man was 89. In a difficult situation and on his own. I'm wondering, because his family weren't able to be with them, I'm wondering whether there's an issue for us here with older or more vulnerable people who don't have a relative or friend with them in order to advocate on their behalves. Is that something that we need to consider?
Barry, did you get that? Do you want to comment on that?
So thank you, Karen. The first point, so Lorraine has met with Mr. R's family, and Lorraine has been the communication link. I think Lorraine wants to come in just to confirm that now. Thanks.
Yeah, I've been their link throughout really. They only ever want to see this as a learning curve for holistic care and not just a broken ankle. I think it was that upset Mrs. R more than anything, was that she sort of realised that he hadn't had his medication, so that's why she went home on the Saturday to bring it in. The daughter is actually, I don't know whether I should say this, but is a senior nurse in Australia, so she does know what goes on and what have you. But I think it was the holistic approach was one thing. They were actually allowed to be by his side in the hospital when they came, when he was, when they were sent for. So they were with him all the time then. It is just the fact that they don't want to proceed with anything that is above a learning curve. That's from the family situation.
Thank you.
Guide the board here, Barry, if you don't mind. Yeah, we are in danger here, colleagues, of doing two things. One, giving enough information to identify Mr. R, and I think we should be conscious of that. Secondly, we're in danger of replicating some of the questions that will be asked by those who will look at this as an incident. And really, we are looking for assurance that that will be done. We don't need to do that in the board. So I think, Karen, if you don't mind, I'm going to take the comments that you made. Richard's taking notes, and that will be fed into, like Sarah, the sort of things that we've been looked at in the incident. It will then go through quality and then to the board for assurance purposes.
Yeah, absolutely happy with that. I simply raised the advocacy point because I didn't see it in the action tracker, but yeah, very happy for that to be progressed through that channel.
Thank you. Just before I bring you in, Saturday, let me just check. Lorraine, is that a legacy hand, or have you got a further point to make?
It was a legacy hand, sorry.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'll be very brief, and most of the points have been covered. This is just a couple of flags for consideration by the patient experience group and the quality committee. One is overall, I was curious to understand if we ever asked what really mattered to Mr. R when he was brought in, when he was waiting for the 29 hours in a chair. And the reason for asking is that could have triggered, given the pre-existing clinical condition around possibly end of life. I don't know the relevant situation, possibly end of life care pathways or palliative care pathways. The other thing I wanted to flag is overall, given that it sort of cuts across geographical boundaries, organizational boundaries, and so on, what would be our understanding collectively as a board from the time it took from the incident to actually understanding this and feeding back to relevant agencies that are beyond our trust, really. So those are the two flags for your consideration. Barry, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Again, we'll take those as contributions for colleagues to take away.
We're struggling to hear you, Mike.
Okay, I'll try and speak up. Is that better? Can you hear me now? No problem.
Yeah.
I'll raise my voice, Sakti, and hope that doesn't.
Hugh, we could hear this side of the room, Jane and Hugh, and less on the other side of the room. Thank you.
Lorraine?
Can I just point out, Sakti, that the man actually lives in North Yorkshire, but he's actually under the care of UHMBT through his GP. So he lives in the North Yorkshire part of UHMBT. It's not that he's jumped boundaries, if you like, because of where he lives. Where he lives is within our catchment area. Thank you.
Good point, Lorraine. We do cover North Yorkshire as our catchment. Thank you. Okay, colleagues, are we happy if we move on? Right, we'll move on then to item 46, Chair's report. It's there in front of you, but before I bring you to the body of the report, would we be remiss of me not to say that it's the 5th of July today, and for many of us that will be a birthday treat because the NHS is 75 years old today, 5th of July 1948, Aneurin Bevan. I have to confess, my youngest son is named Aneurin after Bevan, after the NHS, so he'll never forgive me for everybody calling him Aneurin. But it's really important that we minute that it's a really important day. You know, it's the only such system in the world, and it's under increasing pressures, as we all know, post-COVID. There are claims of a managed decline or moves to bring in insurance system alongside it, etc. But I think today we should just note that after 75 years,
the NHS is not the NHS of 1948 or the NHS of 1963 or 75. It's still here, free at the point of access. It just keeps reforming, and I'm hoping it will keep reforming for the next 100 years. But I think we should acknowledge that in the meeting. And a piece of useless information in case colleagues want to root out the history. The Beveridge report, William Beveridge's great report, 1945, great for a pub quiz. His research assistant was a young man called Harold Wilson, and led the 1970s great changes in the NHS and social care. Gave us the Equalities Act, etc., the Discrimination Act. So those great thinkers have continued to, I think, evolve and support the NHS. Long may it continue. I think we should formally minute the recognition. Lastly, for the trust, our staff continue to be resilient. Our staff morale continues to be strong. Our staff are committed. We're not out the woods. There's loads of things to do post-COVID, and there's loads of things to do to get this trust to a soft 2. But I think we should just take a minute to just acknowledge that, you know, our great thanks to the staff that contribute everything. Because at the very least, all of us in this room, because we are the board, this hospital doesn't belong to us. And the NHS doesn't belong to us. The executives manage it to the best of their abilities. And the NEDs hold them to account and do governance to the best of our abilities. But really, this hospital and this NHS belongs to the public. We are, at the very last point, public servants. So I'd like to just acknowledge thanks to all our staff for being really, really good public servants. I'll open the floor if anybody wants to comment on the 75th birthday. No? Okay. The report you have in front of it speaks for itself. It's got the activities for the last month. Many of the real substantive issues comes into the next item, which is the Chief Exec's report. But happy to answer any questions on the Chair's report. No? Happy to accept it? Okay, folks, then we'll move on to item 47, Chief Exec report.
Thank you, Chair. So having had written a speech for the NHS 75th birthday that the Chair's just done, might be a little shorter. So my report contains quite a bit that features elsewhere on the agenda, including the work of the ICB, the Provider Collaborative, and some of the work we're doing around our transition from the Recovery Support Programme approach to our Transformation Improvement Board, which Chris will say a little bit more about further on the agenda. A couple of updates from me, though, for the board to be aware of. Our CQC inspection report. We are expecting the draft factual accuracy checking in about 2 weeks' time. There has been a slight delay with the CQC down to some unplanned absence from key individuals who are writing that report. Entirely understandable, but it's going to be delayed for a week or two. We remain focused on the feedback we've had through the core clinical inspection, the well-led inspection, both verbal and in writing, which we've shared with the board before. Our focus is on the continuous improvement work that will feature elsewhere on the agenda for kind of board visibility and assurance. So there isn't anything that we've had fed back that changes the priorities or the delivery focus that the executive and the clinical and operational teams have got in front of them. I'm not going to say too much around the recovery support programme and our supported recommendation from our regional team for SOF 4 exiting to SOF 3. That is still part of an ongoing assurance review process with the region and the national team. We're likely to get some indication of a date for review of that in Q2, and we'll keep the board updated as to that as it progresses. The majority of my report has a section in it which I wanted to highlight for the board. We talk a lot here about workforce, both in terms of celebrating the resilience and the momentum that our teams have built over the last 2 or 3 years on the improvement journey, and rightly so. And also where we know we've got issues with recruitment, with retention, with morale, because it isn't strong everywhere. I just need to be really clear that there are still areas of our organisation where colleagues are not having a great time of it, and we need to do more to make sure that being a great place to work needs to mean something to every colleague every day in every department, and we won't stop until that's the case. But I'm really, really proud of the work that our strategic recruitment team do. And it's led by Alicia Turner and Ian Hook and others who I'll forget to mention, but they're on Twitter at me most days. So I'll pick that up later. But you'll see 7 or 8 key strategic programs of activity in my report that are beginning to have a material impact. So whether it's the apprenticeships, the T-levels, the Step Into Work programme, the refugee support, the BAPIO work, the work we've done with the DFN programme, which I am personally, you will stop me tweeting and Facebooking that, but those are young people who ordinarily would find it very, very difficult to obtain work in our communities. And I think we've got almost 100% success rate in this cohort as a result of 6 months with us. I think 2 or 3 have actually secured positions in the trust, and the rest have secured positions locally and are now able to sustain, seek employment elsewhere, and get kind of living arrangements that promote independence. It's just a fantastic programme. So if you haven't seen or heard anything from the DFN project, might even do a story of that. Part of that. So I just wanted to put that in my report, not as an assurance report, not to include in the IPR and workforce, but just to bring to life the alternative approaches that we're engaged in leading and promoting in our communities. And interestingly for me anyway, getting the numbers in there. So you can see the spread, you can see the conversion. We're going to match and track that through our own reports about the progress we're making. But it's just something I'm really proud of, and I wanted to share in a board report out with the formal agenda. The final point I'll make, Chair, is I guess the national picture. It's an odd time, Q1 of any delivery year, because there is still a lot of work being done on things like year-end financials, setting up plans for the coming year. I know for some colleagues who work in different sectors or have different experience, it feels a bit odd that 3 months after the year has started, we're still in that refinement of targets and getting the assurance processes right. That is a product of how the NHS's national planning process works. So we've only just had formal writing through the ICB in the region that the 23-24 planning process, submission, scrutiny and agreements is now completed. So our focus is absolutely and resolutely on a number of key areas. It's making sure that we are delivering against our ambitions, predominantly in the elective recovery, urgent care improvement and financial trajectory space. Operationally, that's where the push is. To make sure that we're building on the platform we've created through the recovery support programme for continued improvement in quality and safety performance that Tabitha and Jane lead on under the recovery support and the transformation improvement board, and looking after colleagues. So managing things like the industrial action or big transformational change, because that's in front of us now when we're talking about the challenges in front of us. There is a significant programme of work still and will remain so on making sure that colleagues are well supported, have access to what they need to do the job effectively, and opportunities to raise concerns and deal with them quickly when they come up the line. So that's as much as I was going to say on my report, Chair. A little more brief this morning, given that you need half time.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for the Chief Exec on his report? Tony, Sarah, and Adrian.
Not so much a question, but just to amplify what the Chief Exec was saying. I mean, he's absolutely right. There's some fantastic, and I mean fantastic, work being done in terms of workforce, as is captured here. I've had the pleasure of kind of seeing some of that, reading about it, and particularly the partnerships with schools, colleges, and various other public sector partners and commercial partners. Just to amplify what Aaron said, we don't have the right staff and don't grow them for the future, then we've got a problem for the patient's experience. And I'm just wondering, as part of that patient story, in inverted commas, we could do something around amplifying and showing and demonstrating what's going on, because I think it's good learning and experience for other trusts in the region and nationally. But also, I just think it's good for us to see what's going on, because we're recruiting and employing some fantastic people. So I just want to say thank you for highlighting that.
Thanks, Tom. Sarah, please.
Thank you. My point follows on really neatly from that, actually, because I sit on a number of partnership type boards and steering groups on Lancaster University, and actually colleagues from the trust, including Leach, are actually contributing to those steering groups to share the practice and the initiatives that you have within the trust, so that other anchor organisations, so not just NHS organisations, but other anchor organisations can look at how they can support people into work as well. So I think it was just really important to note that, given that partnership and anchor work is part of our strategic.
Thank you. Adrian?
Sorry to continue the same theme, but it is to commend and recognise that work and just to state that this is one of the practical and pragmatic ways as an anchor institution we can actually tackle inequalities in our community. Yeah. And so the real opportunities to show leadership, both ourselves and across our partnerships, to really bring into play and into our workforce, which we know are most at risk within our communities. So it is great to see this. I can see there's a lot of focus on inequalities and addressing discrimination and underrepresented groups, addressing deprivation, but I would like to see more focus on that and just assurance that when we're making those connections with those communities, that's where we're focusing those opportunities. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll go Sakti and then yourself, Hugh. Is that okay?
Thank you, Chair. I mean, Adrian stole my thunder. The point I was going to add is there is some great work happening here that also needs to be promoted and showcased in the wider public sector forums, particularly with an angle of how we secure jobs for the future within the Lancashire economy or Lancashire and South Cumbria economy, and particularly with an economic growth point of view. So I would just encourage us to consider how this is being showcased into wider public sector forums like the Lancashire 2050, for instance. We have a health and well-being platform within that as a theme from which we really have an opportunity to really showcase and create further momentum behind this. Thank you, Aaron and the team.
Okay. Ali may want to reply to that particular point.
Yeah. So a lot of the activity and the work that's being showcased here is being picked up as part of the work across the ICB and recognised as best practice to the extent that many of the other trusts in the area are now replicating. It's also something that we can pick up as part of the ICB. One of the strategic workforce priorities for the ICB is around building capacity, and that is not just the capacity now but the future capacity through the pipelines that we create through vocational learning opportunities, for example. So we've got local authority and third sector involved with that, so we can make sure that we kind of linked into those environments to make sure that we are able to kind of replicate this across the broader public sector.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. I concur with everything that everybody said. I just want to commend Aaron for using his report in this way. I think it's an example of, in less than a page, he's got across a whole load of stuff that immediately generated a lot of response and thoughts. And going forward, this could have come as a paper, which could have been 8 pages long, and it wasn't necessary to do something of that length. So I think just as we think about how we cope with the amount of stuff that we've got generally, using Aaron's report to highlight other areas in the trust like this, but also succinctness in sort of the writing of other reports. I read it and immediately got a massive grasp of all that was going on and thought, wow, as did everybody else. It's probably more impactful actually than having it as a full report.
Thank you. Take those as notes. Happy to accept the Chief Exec's report, colleagues? Okay, thank you. Then we'll move on to item 48, Head Governor report. Lorraine, anything you want to talk us through on your report, please?
No, there's nothing in the report, just take that as read. But one of the things that I do want to add is to say happy birthday to the NHS. I think we all forget that there are people still alive that were pre the NHS movement coming along. My brother was one of them who needed some orthopaedic correction. And that started from virtually the day he was born. My mother had to travel to the hospital on a weekly basis for many, many years. And after the NHS come in, the relief for her not having to foot any bills was enormous. So I am grateful for the NHS, and his orthopaedic treatment was fine.
Thanks, Lorraine. And I suppose I should just mention as chair that you yourself was a diabetic clinical specialist nurse in the NHS as well. So you served in the NHS, we should acknowledge that. But anything for the Head Governor's report?
It was actually Head Governor's report, other than to say, I think we probably all at times feel the NHS is under a lot of threat, if not all the time. And if there was ever a speech worth watching, it's the Harry Leslie Smith speech, who I'm really proud to say came from Barnsley, where I'm from. But it's a gentleman who very eloquently describes life before the NHS and how it changed things. And it absolutely positions your mind that we need to do everything we can to maintain it.
Yeah, thank you. If it's all right, Jane, we'll ask the company secretary to just circulate that.
Yeah.
The name of
There is
that.
me crying every time I watch it.
Okay, thank you. Head Governor, thank you for your report.
Thank you.
Colleagues, happy to accept it. Okay, we'll move on then. Item quality and safety now. Item 49A and 49.2 around maternity. Tabitha, Chief Nursing Officer, to introduce 49.1, please, maternity safety update.
Thank you, Chair. These two items come to board just for assurance and national oversight. So to present this and update us in terms of where we are around our continuing improvement within maternity and where we are with the Ockenden, recommendations, I will introduce Heather.
Heather, are you there? See her before.
She's not there yet.
No.
She's not due until 10:15, Chair, so she might be.
We can either take the reports as read and wait for Heather if anybody's got any questions, because they're just here as the requirement of the national updates for us
to note the report.
to note the reports. Yeah.
Sarah?
Given that Heather's not here as well, I chaired Quality Committee, and so we did receive the reports at Quality Committee as well, so they were considered there. And I have asked as part of my alert in the Quality Assurance Committee report that a number of national guidance documents have been issued in the last month or so, and the implementation of those will likely have an impact around finance and resources. So that's something that's being moved through by maternity, and will come forward in due course. That's something that the Quality Committee noted that will come through.
We'll take that as both an assurance and a triangulation of the report that we got today as well. Aaron, as our maternity lead in the NEDs, anything you wish to add on this report?
Yes, please. Just one point, and it arises from maternity, but clearly has wider applicability for us as a trust. And this is really the issue of sustaining improvement, which is clearly a hot topic for us. And the question is really, as part of the soft 4 to 3 to 2 journey, have we identified other partners or other peer organisations from whom we can learn about sustainability and sustaining improvement, so that we can really begin to identify some key metrics, some key actions to really make that assurance around sustainability become more concrete?
Thank you, Karen. Not formally, but I have got peers who I work with around sustainability. We have had a lot of discussions with Heather in terms of like our MSSP and how we can sustain the improvements that we've done around our leadership, governance, strategy, and everything. But we can formalize with peers who are outstanding and they've done things maybe that we need to learn from and then bring it to board. I'm happy to take that as an action.
Thank you. Chris?
And the structure of our improvement programme, remember the exit criteria was around getting assurance that the MSSP programme had progressed and that the conditions were, that have been placed on maternity were going to be lifted. The next phase was always about sustainability. So it's the sustainability phase of the MSSP, which is contained within our future improvement.
Thank you. Hugh?
Chair, I think Karen hinted that this has a wider applicability beyond just maternity, because of the whole of what we've been through in the last 2 years is about in this very, I would say, accelerated it, and it's felt almost like aggressive approach to sort of having to make changes and improve. I don't mean aggressive in the wrong sense, but I think people know what I mean. But it's probably not quite the right use of the word, right word. But I think in terms of sustaining it and everything going to a lot of things now, as we go on later and to look at some of the board papers, it goes to business as usual, business as usual, business as usual. It's what capacity, I think we need to be able to understand as a board what capacity we have to actually deliver that. And I know that that's going to link in part to the wider ICB and how improvement work and such like integrates all that. So I think at some point, whether it's formally or informally in a development session or in part, we could do with more greater understanding of how that's going to work and what resource we've got within our organisation and what we're going to share across the ICB. I'd like to see Aaron wants to chief exec.
Yeah, it's two quick points really. So one is just to remind the board that the transition work we've done over the last 3 months designed to answer both Karen's question and Hugh's question on that's the acid test. Is the 3 to 2 isn't a stop doing something and look at different actions. A big part of that progression is embedding, sustaining and continuously improving what we've already started to work on. So when we look at the changes we made to things like the performance assurance framework, the QGAF, the IPR and what data we're looking to put in place, the infrastructure of support that we're putting through the continuous quality improvement programme and the replacement to our recovery support programme board, the transformation improvement board, all of that work is designed to give assurance around that question of, so how will we be assured that the capacity, capability and momentum can be maintained for that 3 to 2 and beyond journey. So it feels like actually the proposal, Chair, for a part 2 board, 45 minutes on getting into some of that, because we do it through the papers and the updates, but I think taking a composite view of answering that question was probably something of real value. The second point I would make is to Sarah's point about the new guidance and other things coming now. Today it's women's and children's, but that happens in lots of our services where the flag is this is going to have a bill attached. We need to be really clear as a board that regardless of national guidance or instruction, it doesn't add to the deficit. This is not a dialogue around, oh, well, it's just cost that we have to commit because it's quality and safety. Quality, safety, performance, wellbeing and finance are equal in terms of our accountability as a board. So what I'm guarding against is recommendations that say, actually, we just need to get this done because it has this lilt of a national push. The executives, the clinical and operational teams are going to be working on balance of risk, difficult decisions potentially on pace of delivery and change as we try and balance those 3 or 4 different priorities. And we'll need to find some time and space for the board when we're making those recommendations to have the appropriate assurances when we go through that. So I just wanted to signal a bit more discipline and kind of scrutiny in some of those proposals, because traditionally what will happen is you get a direction, it has to be implemented, and we'll deal with the consequences later in that.
Hey colleagues, Heather, welcome to the meeting. For your information, we started on the item on the maternity safety update a few minutes ago. We recognise that it's both a note and assurance. We've gone through the various elements of the report. The Chief Nursing Officer performed very well actually and answered some of our questions on behalf of maternity. So I'm just going to ask you, before I ask colleagues to accept or not the report, are there any assurance issues that you wish to bring to the board's attention related to the maternity safety update?
No, I don't feel like there is, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Then colleagues, Adrian.
Thanks, Chair. Heather, now that you're able to join us at the meeting, I just wanted to ask a question about the cultural improvement activity and the engagement and the indications of the effectiveness of that programme. If you could just assure us on progress with that. Thank you.
Thanks, Adrian. So the cultural diagnostics is still ongoing. There's several phases to that, and I'm sure Ali could add some more context to what's actually involved. But the survey has currently been completed, and we've got some initial findings, but they're only outline findings. The psychologist is now currently doing the one-to-one sessions with the teams. We've held a black and brown staff listening event, which we've just received a report from in the last couple of weeks. We've obviously got the SCORE survey that will be being rolled out at the end of July. That's around more similar sort of cultural diagnostics, but that's part of the National Perinatal Quality and Leadership Programme. So I would say to assure you, Adrian, that the work's ongoing, but we haven't got any outputs as such yet for us to be able to look at what the actual pieces of work are that we're going to roll out in terms of what the diagnostics tell us.
So the level of engagement's good. That's the key thing for me, Heather.
Yeah, there's quite a lot of uptake, probably more than we've previously had in other pieces of work we've done. So it's something that we'll monitor, because obviously it's predominantly focused at South Lakes. So when we do the SCORE survey, which is it is across the whole of maternity and neonatal services, we'll be able to have a really good view on how much engagement we have across the service, rather than just what the engagement's like at South Lakes. So that will give us a better picture.
Thank you. Ali, our Chief People Officer, has intimated you've answered the question, Heather, so I'm going to ask colleagues then if they're happy to accept the note, the report, both for noting and assurance purposes. Yeah, thank you. Chief Nursing Officer, we'll move on to 49.2, the Ockenden report.
Thank you, Chair. Once again, I bring Heather to talk us through the Ockenden recommendations and compliance in terms of where we are as an organisation. Thank you.
Thank you, Tabitha. So I'll take the report as read. This is an update paper on the Ockenden immediate and essential actions and the insights visit. So you'll see within the paper we're currently compliant with 6 of the 7 immediate and essential actions and 1 partial compliance, and that was regarding the review of the midwifery-led offer at South Lakes Birth Centre. And I've received the draft of that, so I fully expect us to be fully compliant with all 7 immediate and essential actions by the end of July. So I hope, Chair, that that provides assurance of our current progress and current compliance.
Thank you, Heather. Actually, yes, and please pass our congratulations and thanks to colleagues. That's a really heartening piece of news, actually, that we met all 7. So colleagues, any questions to Heather? Thank you. We're asked to check. No, we're asked to note the report, Heather. I always ask you this. Any issues of assurance you wish to bring to the board?
No, thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you.
I just want to thank Heather, because just for board to there is a lot happening within maternity. There's a lot of asks, and just appreciate what Heather and team are doing to keep mums and babies and everyone.
What we'll do is we'll note that in the minutes, Tabitha, if that's all right. And then if you're happy with it, through you as Chief Nurse, we'll do a note from the board to express our thanks and gratitude to Heather and her colleagues. The Secretary can do that. Okay, Heather, and then if you could verbally pass back our thanks. We know you're doing a sterling job. Thank you. We will as a board probably come back to you on a different venue to talk about sustainability and maintenance, and how we keep the continuity going and where the stress test areas are really. But thank you.
Thank you very much.
Bye, Heather. Okay, we note the report. Recovery support programme then. Deputy Chief Exec, Chris, you probably have to raise your voice, Chris, because of the issues around sound on that side of the room.
Okay, I'll do my best. So the report focuses on the closure of the RSP work streams and transition into established governance and oversight arrangements, some of which, of course, were a focus of the recovery support programme, or, of course, where appropriate, new improvement work streams. It's relevant, I think, to note that the Trust has not yet formally exited SOF 4, and therefore we remain within the recovery support programme at this stage. We have agreed with NHSE and our colleagues from the intensive support team, as well as colleagues from the Integrated Care Board, that we will continue the development of our plans as previously articulated, pending the conclusion of the national processes. And in respect to that, we have had recently a number of positive discussions with colleagues from the intensive support team, both at a regional and national level. And we've also received positive feedback on discussions that happened between the NHSE CFO, Chief Financial Officer, regional team and the Integrated Care Board last Friday. We've requested confirmation of any revisions to the anticipated timetable and associated processes from our colleagues at NHSE. Of course, we will advise the board once we have any that information. Within the report, just one comment. Paragraph 4 says that NHSE are reducing the oversight arrangements that they have in place. It's more accurate, I think, to describe this as transition of oversight through a joint arrangement with the Integrated Care Board, and in the short term, rather than as a reduction in oversight. There remains some uncertainty about how and when NHSE would step aside. And the first of the new improvement and assurance group meetings is being held next week, and we of course provide updates from those meetings and through our future board reporting arrangements.
Just for board's awareness, really, we are awaiting this, we are in this transition phase, and we are awaiting some decisions nationally, but the plan for the Trust operationally and strategically is to continue to improve the Trust so that we reach SOF 2. So we won't be distracted by these issues. We will continue to embed and continue to build up continuity, as we were just saying to Heather. So we'll remain focused on that while we wait for the national discussions to take their due course. Any questions to our Deputy Chief Executive on his report? Sarah?
Thank you. My question just relates to the ongoing governance and oversight arrangements for some of the streams. For most of them, it clearly states what the committee is or the subcommittee is that it will go through, but there are a number, particularly the two, called finance and performance, which are going, one of them is going to Transformation and Improvement Board, and ops and performance around urgent emergency care doesn't state a subcommittee. Would that be a finance and performance committee?
Yeah, that's update that, because both that committee oversees both finance and performance.
Yeah, I think that would be helpful. And then there was also a question around risk management group, which I think comes through to quality committee. Is that correct? So just making sure we're really clear about what those lines of accountability.
Absolutely, clarify.
Thank you.
Sakthi, please.
Just, Chair, there's just a flag from previous experience. In terms of the projects that are in the table as foreclosure, that it is done with agreement, although we are waiting for national signals, that actually there is a shared understanding that this is all going to be closed. Just flagging, because in the past there has been instances where organisation closed its arrangements and then somebody else came along and used that as, well, we didn't agree to it and the national picture changes. And I'm just flagging that from past experience, just for assurance, I guess. Thank you.
Really good assurance point.
Two points in response to that. So this report's going to the Improvement Assurance Group meeting next week in this form. So we will be having that discussion with our ICB and regional colleagues. Secondly, closure actually suggests that it's ended. It's actually a stepping back of the additional assurance that we operated through RSP. It is absolutely about maintenance and reinforcing the assurance through our standard governance processes. And just as further assurance to the board, we're taking a 3-month and 6-month review of how that has gone. We also be sending out a note to chairs of the committees after the meeting today, just to confirm that what it is that we're expecting to be monitored through those committees and how.
Right. Yeah, good point, exactly. Yeah.
That would be appreciated, Chair. Having read all the ones that had quality next to them.
Yeah, there's several qualities, 2 people, yeah, okay, thank you. Karen?
Oh, thank you. I think relatively similar point to Sarah's. It's really helpful to see table 1 and the that assurance around the oversight arrangements. I was just a little concerned though to see those that relate to leadership and culture are less specific or appear less specific than the others. So in the others we can see specific committees, specific groups, but that one really refers to people committee substructures, and I wondered why that maybe was less explicit than the others in the table.
So I can't reference it to why it is that in the table referred to that way, but we have now set 4 programme boards under the people committee, and therefore these are clearly identified as areas of responsibility for those programme boards, which will escalate obviously into people committee and report. So one obviously leadership, the leadership and culture, we have got the leadership element, which will be through the learning and education faculty programme board, and we'll have the culture and the freedom to speak up will come through the culture and inclusion programme board.
Oh, thanks, Ali. That's really helpful.
Okay, colleagues, then are you happy to accept the current processes underway via NHS England and also the segmentation of the soft activities during transition? Yeah, great, thank you. Chris, thank you very much. Okay, then we're on to performance and resources, still with the Deputy Chief Exec. I'll give you the floor, Chris. You take us through who comes in and if you wish to then take questions. If colleagues are comfortable, we'll allow the execs to do their presentations and then have questions when the executives are presented.
Okay, thanks, Chair. The order that we'll go through, I've just got a couple of headlines to begin with, introductory comments. We'll go through quality and safety, then people, finance, and then operational delivery. So firstly, though, I just want to highlight the new addition to the integrated performance report, the inclusion of the data quality indicators. So it's a further example, and this is really good work from our BI team to develop this. It's further example of the ongoing development of our data assurance and capability work. And this is designed to add to the assurance that not only when we get data, we use it effectively, but we're actually proactively and continuously validating and checking the quality of that data. So the indicators are just have been developed to give the board some insight to the data quality in some specific areas, and where there's work to be done, we'll be looking to progress and report that work as it is done. So that's the first thing. You'll also recall that last time I was asked about what happened to the metrics identified to be consistently failing against the identified target. We are just finalising this process to coordinate formally between our planning and performance team and our improvement teams. Our intention going forward will be to record within the IPR where the consistent fails are being reviewed, any actions taken, and the assurance route they will follow to enhance visibility and assurance associated with the information that's contained within the IPR. So that's still a bit under development, but the process is currently being established. So that was the 2 points I wanted to raise about the IPR in general. In terms of, we'll get into so I'll start with quality and safety, chief nurse, and then the bring to the board's attention.
Thank you, Chair. Chris. So I'm going to take you through pages 86 to 93. I've got my own way of outlining the performance for quality. I'm focusing on patient safety, IPC, patient relations, and friends and family, and they're all in those pages. And the medical director will take the mortality and VTE. So it's good news to sort of mention within the period that we're reporting now, we've got no never events at the moment during the month that we're reporting. And we're showing a significant improvement around our falls with moderate harm, which is really good. And a lot of work is happening in terms of continuous improvement through our fundamentals of care work that we're doing through the Hive. The risk assessments, false risk assessments, everything is in place to keep our patients safe. Moving on to pressure ulcers, we're still looking really up, but this is all in category 2. And the reason why we have to mention category 2, because once we start causing harm into 3 and 4, it goes into like safeguarding reporting. So I'm giving board assurance that we have got no 3s or 4s around our pressure ulcers. And we've also made significant improvements in ED, where our patients sometimes are being nursed within the corridors. And we've put pressure relieving mattresses to make sure that the patients are also being looked after safely. So the assurance is there's no lapses in care. However, we also noticed that we used to have gaps in documentation, and that is really, really improved. So the gaps in documentation is also reducing. So there is a lot going. IPC, I'm quite happy to sort of give board assurance to sort of say at the moment, we've got no MRSA outbreaks or C. diff outbreaks. So far it's showing an improvement, and we keep to sort of monitor, so we're consistently below average, which is a good place to be. So we just have to keep our foot on the pedal. Our friends and family tests overall for the trust-wide, we are at 92%, we should be 94%. So that's slightly below. And unfortunately, within the performance, we've not shown them with care groups, which is something I will sort of need to remind that we show care groups in terms of how they're performing around friends and family tests and what we are doing to actually increase the numbers. But from the data that I've got, it shows that most of our inpatients areas, that's where the low friends and family tests are low compliant. But like I say, there is something that's missing within our figures as of today. Complaints, which is on page 86, there's a significant amount of work that's going into complaints, and I'm sure Richard can support on that, as we have had a backlog. And last board meeting, I went with an action to look at our complaints process, our complaints backlog, and we took that on board, and we've put extra resources to try and help us look at how we can reduce the backlog, as well as how we can do things different. When I finish, Richard can add on to that. Mixed sex accommodation, it says 0, but that's actually not accurate, because we have had 21 breaches and they've not pulled through. I'm not sure why they've not pulled through to our IPR. So we had 19 delayed transfers from ICU, and then we had 2 patients who were in Phoenix. They stayed in stroke and they were supposed to be moved somewhere else. So there's a bit around flow and mixed sex and everything. So I just wanted to highlight that, and that's on page 92. So I will pass over to Jane to talk about VTE and mortality.
If I can just interrupt, Tabitha, just before you come in, Jane, you said that Richard might add on to your report.
Yes.
So anything you want to add on to the report?
Well, I'm just happy to share a couple of points about what we're doing in complaints, because we recognise it's a clear area for improvement. So did the CQC. Our April figures show 8 complaints over a 6-month period. We still think it's perfectly reasonable to have a target of 0.4 per 1,000 bed days as a goal, and it's at 1.2 at the moment. So we understand very clearly that we need to do something. So we've come up with a 5-point plan. The first point is about sorting out the system that we use, because it's not entirely clear the data in the system. As an example, if you were to go into Status of complaint, there were 53 different options to choose from just on the status of a complaint, getting that down to 15 so we can clean up the data and make it easier for people to use so that we can then generate reports that make much more sense to us. There's a piece of work to do around engaging with the care groups much more proactively, pick up the phone, don't send another email, that sort of stuff. And then we've really got to deliver on the performance. We've put an extra 1.4 whole-time equivalent staff in to tackle the backlog that's spread over 3 individuals, but some of them come with comms experience, some of them come with complaints experience from previously working there, so we've been quite sophisticated about who we pull into that equation. We have a new manager borrowed from the comms team who's helping us. And then finally, we've got the MIAA review, which is due to report back, I would think, in the next month or so. And we specifically said, go find good examples from outside the NH. We know we have a problem here. Give me best examples from elsewhere. So all that's in play at the moment, but it is a bit of an oil tanker. And I would predict that those figures will get slightly worse before they get better.
Question from you, Richard. Which of our board subcommittees will have oversight?
Quality Assurance Committee would be the place I will be held to account for that improvement.
Thank you. Are these happy with that update? Okay.
Okay, so I've just got VTE and mortality. So VTE is starting to have some improvements. It's a hard slog to improve it. The data start off in a really poor place, and just as we think we've cracked it, we find other data anomalies. So there's lots of work going on both around that, but also around things that we can do to try and improve it. So we've looked at what other trusts have done in terms of their EPR, in making sure that you can't move on without doing a VTE assessment, etc., and seeing how we can do some of those. But we are starting to see it, and the fact that we've got some better data means that care groups are now in ownership of that, and can identify the specific areas to start and work with, rather than it being the whole of surgery or the whole of maternity. Mortality remains good as an overall trust. Both the SHWE and the HSMR, we are below peers, and also all other trusts. So as an overall indicator of mortality, we do very well. Like all trusts, we will have areas that indicate as alerts. We've known about fracture necrophemia being a long-standing problem, and we've got a whole programme of work that reports to Quality Committee around it. We are starting to see improvements there. And then other ones pop up and down. So influenza has been an issue in lots of trusts, but it's around sort of the fact that it's a limited number of months where that usually causes issues. And then acute cerebrovascular disease, again, has remained an amber. There's a lot of work goes on around that, because all of our strokes are reviewed by the stroke team by sort of, I guess, like by peer review. So a stroke death from Furness would be reviewed by the RLI stroke team and vice versa. They share improvements of care and lessons learned monthly with the stroke team. We are clear that coding is quite correct, and we think that there was a spike in August of 22, and that's what's continued to do it, because it's such an annual thing. In addition, there's a second safeguard really, that our MEs, when they do their death reviews, if they have to give a score of whether they feel it's a preventable death or not, and that goes from 1 to 5, it's called a Hogan score. And significant concerns would be Hogan 1 to 3, which is definitely preventable through to probably preventable. If they raise any of those, that also raises an alert and a review. We haven't had anything raised from them around that, so we sort of have it from both sides really. So there's a lot of work going on around that. But overall, we do well, and we're adjusting those alerts.
So, Chief People Officer.
Thank you. So, Chris mentioned earlier that some of the targets and the kind of baseline is going to happen from next month. That will happen for some of the people indicators, particularly with the stepped improvement targets that we've agreed through People Committee around skills, compliance and appraisal. So just want to pick out a few areas if I can. So under the appraisal, you'll recall that we're kind of designing a new process that really tries to address the issue around the quality of the appraisal discussions, as well as supporting the kind of compliance issue. We've got some further testing that's just been completed, so it's been delayed by a month to allow us to just do the final stages of testing so that we're able to go into pilot phase. And whilst we common cause variation remains significantly under target, we have now asked for the care groups to provide recovery plans, and through the performance accountability framework we've had the discussions with each of the care groups, and they've provided us significant assurance around the actions that they're taking to enable them to increase their compliance levels to the 95% by the end of the financial year. From a core skills perspective, we're in special cause variation again, but actually when you take this into the revised targets that have been agreed from a step change perspective, we're actually currently above the target for the expectation at this time of year. So we're on target to deliver the 95% again by the end of March. In terms of vacancies, I think we've got some good news stories here. We talked earlier about all the really proactive things that are happening to help with the future pipeline, but also particularly around the medical workforce with the BAPIO programme. But we have got some particularly challenging areas where we've had long-standing vacancies, and again through the performance framework we've asked each of the care groups now to prepare some workforce plans that look at their prioritised areas based on the fragility of workforce, so where we've got high reliance on temp spend and when we've got additional activity requirements. So that will be the first area of focus for them to help us actually kind of inform what the workforce plans need to look like for them. But it's good news when we look at the nursing, in particular the registered nursing vacancy rates, because if we look at ours, which is just over 2%, we're actually performing much better than the vast majority of organisations in the Northwest. So I think we should just recognise that there's been a whole load of people who've been involved in that, from international recruitment teams, the teams that support the onboarding, the work that happens to support the clinical placements and supporting our newly qualified staff as they come in. So recognise that. And then from a sickness absence perspective, again, we're in common cause variation, but we're seeing a significant improvement here. And we'll recognise that the national report that came out last week highlighted the significant increase in sickness absence across the NHS. We're actually seeing a different approach with our organisation, and I think some of this is twofold. One, because there's been some really targeted work with the HR teams and the service managers around managing absence, but we've got some fantastic services within occupational health and wellbeing. Access targets, the access times for our psychological support and MSK is around 5 days, which is just amazing and far away the best in the area. And I think one of the things that I would just like to recognise is that the impact that has not only on supporting the reduction in sickness absence, but keeping the people who are in work but maybe have got some psychological support requirements or some MSK issues, keeping them well in work has been really, really helpful, particularly with the proactive approach that they've had and going out to service areas rather than requiring people to come into the service. So they're very, very proactive in outreach. And I think the other thing I would want to mention here is that as we obviously move into kind of shared service collaboration, when we've got fantastic services with the access times and crucially the outputs are causing us to have a reduction in sickness absence and an improvement in the well-being of our people, we just need to be mindful that as we move into shared service collaboration, we maintain those service standards, because it's all consistent with what has come out in the National Workforce Plan, where we should be focusing on supporting the well-being of our people.
Thank you. Chris? Finance section next, so I won't repeat the information contained in the pack. It's just about providing some additional advice and context that I think is relevant to the board's consideration of the position that's presented. So whilst the trust financial position is in line with the plan, board members be aware firstly of the level of financial risk contained within the overall plan for the year, and specifically the impact of financial improvement stretch target of £20 million is contained within our final submitted plans. Where overspending has been identified during the year so far, all care groups have been required to submit a financial recovery plan in order that their forecasts can be properly considered through the Q1 reporting cycle and specifically through the July performance review meetings. We've we've established an escalated and supported process in a couple of instances where financial performance and concerns related to decision-making and their financial recovery arrangements are such that an early response was identified as necessary. We've already strengthened the pay control environment. We discussed that previously at the board, following on from our self-assessments against the NHSE grip and control checklist and the mandated HFMA financial sustainability checklist, and that pay control group's now fully operational. Some specific lines of inquiry and improvement actions have been identified in respect of agency costs and other high impact variances. Through this process, we've also identified further training requirements for managers to ensure, firstly, that they fully understand and then secondly, can effectively use the set out of the established processes. The board will note that the month one reported savings delivery is lower than planned. I can confirm that through our month two reporting process, it's been confirmed that the savings identified as non-recurrent have now been identified recurrently, and the position therefore is in line with the profile plans. There is a statement in the report that it's assumed that the trust will achieve its plan at the early stage of the year. I think that requires a bit of clarification. We're very clear about the scale of the financial challenge and the required stretch target for 23-24. We're not at this stage able to advise the board that we've identified schemes which will fully achieve all of our financial improvement targets. But it's important to note that it remains a specific and identified risk, despite the fact that we have achieved our plans in the year-to-date position. This, of course, is the result of the profile of our savings plans, reflecting the expectation that the accumulated value of savings will increase throughout the year, and the fact that our stretch target, in line with agreements with our system partners, was profiled into months 4 to 12. We, of course, report on this and good progress that we're making in the identification of financial improvement plans to the Finance and Performance Committee. You will have noted already that the Sustainable Financial Improvement Plan will report specifically to the Finance and Performance Committee, and this is all incorporated as part of our monthly reporting cycle. So the statement that I referred to about it is assumed that we will deliver our forecast, it refers to the fact that we would not ordinarily advise a change to our year-end forecast at this point in the financial year. We will be carrying out a detailed review of the Trust's financial position, the recovery plan and improvement actions, and the year-end forecast as part of our Q1 close down process, and we'll be presenting that to the Finance and Performance Committee in July. And that takes us on to the Chief Operating Officer, Chair.
Thank you, Chris. So you will see the operational performance section, some highlights to pull out for the board. For urgent and emergency care, for 4-hour performance, you see the April data, excuse me, in the third point of common cause variation around a mean around 74% cross trust. Performance is 74% in May and June. There is a kind of growing distinction of sustained over 76% performance at Furness, with RLI performance being around 60 to 63%, which will be a major feature of the whole system flow programme. Cross trust performance is in the second quartile nationally and regionally. For ambulance handover times, we're in the 4th month of special cause improvement, having been in special cause concern for the preceding 20 months. Stroke validated performance, as described at the last board, was an A for SNAP at Furness and a B for SNAP at RLI. Having just finished the quarter on Saturday, we are confident that our unvalidated data for Q1 will mirror that and show sustained B performance at RLI and sustained A performance at Furness, which is very positive news. In diagnostics, we've had 4 consecutive data points now at better than the 5% target, and we're comfortable in the second quarter with a good trajectory towards 2%. In cancer, in the 3 really important targets, in 28-day faster diagnostic standard, we're now in 15 months of exceeding the target and in the top quartile. 2-week waits, 8 data points of special cause improvement, and the proportion of patients on the treatment list above 62 days is on or around our target, and we will achieve that. In elective care, you see, again, I'll say that in the pack, it does describe 3 patients breaching 7 to 8 weeks. Those are not reportable breaches, they're not capacity breaches, those are patient choice or clinical complexity. You'll see on page 119, the really encouraging graph on page 119 is the 65-week graph, which is our key elective access target for this year, and is inextricably linked with achieving 109% of the associated income. We're ahead of trajectory on that performance metric towards a trajectory of 0, which is our operational plan commitment for this year. And you'll see a very positive benchmarking in the narrative around local and regional peers for both 52 and 65 weeks. So a quick run through, Chair, but happy to take any questions.
Thank you.
That's it, Chair. Thank you.
I'll open the floor up. Colleagues, questions to our exec? Sarah?
Good. Thank you. I think just first to note from the Quality Assurance Committee point of view that obviously the points around safety and mortality were all discussed at Quality Assurance. A couple of things to mention, I think, on VTE. We did discuss that, although unfortunately a meeting wasn't able to attend, she was on leave. But we've just requested that where we know there are hotspots in care groups, that actually the next report, which is due to committee in July, actually will give us an update on how we're engaging with care groups around that. We had an update on fractured neck of femur as well, and actually I think the data is improving again. It's flagging as green, which is really positive news, but there's also ongoing work around that as well. So we were assured by the ongoing work to improve the pathway for fractured neck of femur. And then we've discussed complaints already, and the ICB were in attendance at the meeting as well, Catherine Lord, and I think was quite assured actually by the update Richard provided on the action plan in place, and also offered some ICB support around that. So those are the things I just wanted to comment on from the Quality Assurance Committee in terms of assurance, hopefully for colleagues.
We'll note those as assurance triangulation points.
Yeah, thank you. So then I had one question which related to the ED 12-hour waits attendance, and I think particularly it says that for RLI it's expected to fail, and our benchmarking unfortunately on that one puts us quite low in the pack. So it was a question for assurance really around whether the actions we have in place are going to be sufficient, do we think, to move out of consistently failing to actually starting to improve, and what might the timeline be for seeing that improvement come through?
I guess it's a similar answer to many boards around it. So consistently failing unscheduled care would put us in the same place as 90% of trusts in England for the targets as expressed. For our obviously changing this year into a 76% target, then we should see the consistent fail come up to achieving that 76% for 4 hours. So I guess that's a new distinction this year in terms of that one. For 12 hours, yeah, I guess we've come out of a period of special cause concern into a period of common cause variation, which is positive. The consistent fail, I think we'll see already at Furness, we are seeing measurable improvements. So what these data don't do, and it may be something that I disentangle when I bring it to the Finance and Performance Committee, is it's clearly not an issue on this site. It's increasingly not an issue at Furness, where our 12-hour performance is 96, 97, 98%. So I'm confident there. For RLI, it will be one of the key dials that we'll seek to move in the whole system flow.
And in terms of timeline for that?
I don't have a timeline just now. I can't give a quantitative timeline just now specifically around 12-hour performance, because it's in the myriad of ambulance handover, 4-hour performance, 12-hour performance, and the other metrics. So the whole system flow programme we will describe with the dials that will move over the course of the next 8 weeks or so. That will then give a line of sight when we expect that now.
Couple of things, Chair. I just want to comment on the really positive. It's really positive to see this service care group and service level data, particularly around, I think it was highlighted in the VTE. I think just to start to see that sort of granularity in the data is really useful. It helps us have a much better feel for where the problems are.
the mortality data, I think is some of that is really encouraging, actually. Not only the overall performance over a period of time, but the been asking questions at quality and here about acute cerebral vascular. Now to hear today, well, there's no coding issues. We're actually confident about that. We now understand there was a blip last August. So if that's the case, I take it that by September, when we start to get September's 12-month data, that blip will be out and hopefully we'll move to a green again on that. But I don't think we should underestimate Sarah's comment that the last data around fractured neck of femur has now shown us going to green, because that's not just happened by accident. That's happened by an enormous amount of work that's gone on within the orthopaedic team. We've heard at quality quarter by quarter of the detail, and we're getting another report, I think, in July about that may have happened in June. I missed that in June. Yeah. So I think that's really, that should be really noted and encouraged. And with those changes, I think it shows the changes taking place over the last 18 months to 2 years, and the way we start to use this data and interrogate it and then ask for actions as a result to understand it. So I would now feel entirely confident if CQC or someone came and interrogated us about this data to be able to just say, yeah, we are on top of that, and the board and the committees are. So I think we need to acknowledge that. And I think that's starting to come through on all the data. The only comment I would make about mortality is that in the report, it would be useful. It says it's got a summary for the data on the right, and then it's got the actions, and they're both the same. But it would be quite nice. And it's probably, we just need that discipline going through the whole report to make sure the actions are actions, because that helps us as we read it and understand it. I have one question. One question about the finance. Because obviously I'm starting to get our heads around all these charts and new for us around finance, and so I'm still looking at them a bit and sort of just going away. But the table around savings, which is obviously just for month one, we did achieve the 6 million figure, and most of it seemed to be in corporate services. Really encouraging to hear that's now moved. Most of that's moved to recurrent. Obviously, there are big savings in each of the clinical areas, which most of them just say naught at the moment. So I just want assurance that that's actually expected, and that those will pick up as that. Obviously, have those figures just been delivered divided by 12? And we've got the same figure, or are they actually more subtle than that and nuanced than that, and people just haven't as yet really got their foot on the pedal for those?
I think, I mean, some of them are legitimately just in 12ths because of the nature of the saving that it would be. Others, absolutely, there'll be nuances. And of course, what we will need to do is articulate how actual delivery varies from plan, because of course, plan was profiled at a very early stage of development and some of those things. So we do expect to talk to the profile delivery against plan by quarter in our briefing to Finance Committee. Quarter end dates are absolutely critical because they're the ones that the national team will monitor the most closely. So we'll be working to unpack all of this so that there's real transparency. The other thing that we've done is we create this wave system where actually non-execs and execs can all actually drill down to any point in the savings program and understand elements of profiling or delivery and recurrent nature and so forth. So it would be helpful. We can arrange for you to have a session on the wave system itself.
I think that would be good. And also, I think we concurred while I was away on leave, but the way the finance data is now being presented has changed quite radically. Yeah. And I think some help for us to just get our heads around.
I'll take that as an open offer to the board. Any board members are interested, if we could organise through the company secretary session, that would be really useful.
Thank you, Jim.
Okay. I'm going to go Karen, then Sakthi. Karen.
Thank you. Thank you. This is a broader question. Absolutely support everything that everybody said about the IPR and the data and the evidence data-driven approach. I'm thinking particularly about how that impacts on care group leadership and their teams. So clearly the nature of the conversation that he's been having with those care group leaders, whether it's finance, quality and safety, people, ops and performance, really impacting on a really systematic, evidence data driven approach to holding those teams to account. And my question is really, are we doing everything that we can do to enable those people to thrive in what are completely different assurance and accountability conditions than they might have previously experienced? And this relates very much back to sustainability. We need people to thrive in this new way of working rather than struggle.
It's a really pertinent and live issue. What I would say in terms of the escalations that I described on finance, the care group in particular, we first instance totally engaged.
Sorry, Chris, I can't quite hear you.
So the care group that we've been working on the first points of escalation has been really closely engaged in this work and is actually driving it with support from the teams. So that's been a really good process that I'd like to see rolled out in other areas. The second point is that we actually take a great deal of care, firstly about the transparency and the judgment of assessments that we're making and then how we communicate it. So we're going to work with care groups and as ever, the expectation and the intention from those processes is that it enables people to overcome the obstacles that have led to the adverse position. That is our absolute fundamental objective.
Thank you. Chief Exec?
Yeah, it's Karen. So this is a point that I've been really curious about for the last kind of 6-9 months as the path's been put in place, particularly with the impact on morale, culture and leadership. Because what we don't want to do as a leadership team is turn into something where colleagues are not wanting to come and work in that space or find the space difficult. But I'm going to balance that. So I'm going to take the board back 2 years to the survey we did under the Moving Forward and the Clever Together platform and the feedback we got from nearly 2,000 colleagues over the iterations of that. And one of the themes that was fed back was their colleagues wanted more in the responsibility and accountability space. They wanted more in the being held to account and understanding what roles and responsibilities were. So the path, the performance assurance framework development was actually built off the back of a culture survey that our own colleagues were saying, do you know what, when we go to performance reviews or we come to assurance committee meetings, they were celebrating the fact that it was a nice meeting and actually, you know, we didn't get many questions and the presentation landed really well. And over iterations of feedback, what they said is, to a point, that's a nice feeling, but it wasn't clear that we were progressing and pushing and developing and transforming the way that we would want. So actually, there's an edge to our performance accountability framework based on what colleagues were telling us and sharing that they wanted to see under that kind of clear targets, clear responsibility, clear accountability. Now, obviously, when you signal a change like that, there is a cognizance of impact and the supportive nature of introducing that new way of working, which the exec team under Chris's leadership and others is absolutely working with the care groups on. But we still face feedback and questions from care groups on this feels different, it feels a bit more formal, it feels tougher. And the dialogue is, yes, it does. And it's what we've said needed to happen to progress. So there's a direct correlation between the discomfort, the performance assurance framework, and the celebratory nature sometimes, I'll come on to that in a second, of what we see in the IPR and the data moving and some of the improvement work that it's sustaining. And it comes at a kind of a level of challenge that the path's designed to do. I will just say under the IPR though, again today, it feels like a very positive, and because it is, reflection of continuous improvement, data starting to move and the outcomes of pieces of work that we've been driving coming to fruition. But we still have industrial action on top of us. So when Scott produces his elective and urgent care improvement report, there is a risk to the delivery of that over the course of this year that we need to be cognizant of. When Chris presents the finance report, which gives some reassurance of line of sight and visibility of scale of savings, we haven't yet got them all identified. And the transformational change required to release those costs is a significant issue for us on the sustainability and continuous improvement. And that is the level of dialogue, I think. So So it's good to hear the feedback on validating good work and the progression of the IPR, but the risk profile that we have now is still significant. And we need to be better, I think, about identifying those risks and mitigations, as well as delving into the IPR kind of positive outcomes of the improvement work, and both need to feature.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Could I just make one possible suggestion? Thank you for that, Aaron. It's really, really helpful. It's fantastic that we hear a patient story at every board meeting. I wonder whether we might explore an opportunity to hear from staff about their experience of this organisational change and hear from staff about how it's impacting for them.
Thanks, Karen. We'll take that as a suggestion. I'll speak to the company secretary next about that.
Thank you.
Exactly.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, colleagues will know I really look at the IPR report with admiration. And thanks, Chris, for highlighting the data quality new metric added as well. That did draw my attention to a couple of issues just for executives' attention and board assurance. One is infection prevention. All the 4 indicators have been around and quite stable for some time, as far as I'm aware, but the quality of data hasn't been signed off, and that sort of is a query for your attention. And then the second one is the cancer screening. Out of all the cancer metrics, it's the cancer screening that we seem to have a bigger gap between the target and the actual performance. And that might well lead to late diagnosis, and it can feed into a vicious circle for the trust. So I just wanted to flag up those 2 issues for your attention and assurance. Thank you.
Thanks. Actually, you've done some of the things I was going to say, so I won't repeat them, but Aaron did as well. Don't you want to say something?
Well, when you finish, sorry.
I was just going to say that there are signs of pockets of continuing improvement. We recognise the reality, but I think we need to enhance how we now cross-triangulate. So if you look at the finance report, they talk about agency cost at variance. It's roughly about $250,000 to $500,000 a month. Well, you can triangulate that with our vacancy rate, and if you dig down, that rings some warning bells to me as the months go forward. Because even in a conservative thing, the £3 to £4 million out of our planning based on the vacancy rate we've got now, we fill that. Falls, there's a 33% reduction in one ward, but we don't know if there were 3 people and 1 person's actually been sent home. So, what is that data really telling us? The other is it's great that there's no 3s and 4s, but there are still 2s, and we know where the areas where those areas are that are causing the 2s. So what's being done there? So I just a warning, really. This is not a time to be complacent, and really I build on what the chief exec said. And my question to the executives really is, how do we prevent the normalisation of good? Because, all right, so we're doing okay on some of the cancer things, and SACTI, I think quite rightly, is the screening that is the issue, really. How we deal with that, and how fast people get seen on a waiting list is great, but how they get treated is the big issue. How do we, when we get A's and B's in stroke, how do we get A's and A's? How do we really not allow ourselves to fall into a false position because we've got areas of consistent improvement now? How do we keep that going? What will be the next target that the execs will set? Because I know the mandatory and the statutory are there, but underneath that, there are some cracks. I think we just need to ask the subcommittees to make sure that we cross-triangulate, particularly with the finance data, because I think some of the work Chris has done is giving us some early warning signs, potential issues in autumn and Christmas. If you take the cash, for instance, you took some of the cash out, great, but it'll need support within the year to meet that cash total by the end of the year. And so where's that going to come from? So Just giving, I guess it's my role as chair to say, every time we reach good, how do we become better? And every time we reach average, how do we become good? And taking Tabitha's point, where we know where there's areas to do work, how quickly do we fix it? Taking into account everything that Aaron has said about industrial action, blue numbers, slightly worrying a couple of months ago, they seem to have calmed now. That might be an early warning of what's going to happen when it gets cold, late autumn. So, you know, we may get a lot of pressure as we go on within our financial year. Tony, you?
Yeah, it was just a kind of funny. I pick on the back of that. I mean, I'm looking at the agency graphs on whatever pages. 104. That's a bit sad. That's by heart. And I'm just asking us as an executive team and the board as to how confident we are with the mitigations and what we're doing about that, because, you know, if your retention's improving, that means there's less slippage of funds within the system. But agency is a significant issue in the context of the financial challenges we've got, which the ICB will sounds like have an increase in influence and shape over. So, you know, if you look at that chart, above all of them, get the rest of the months, but we're above. So that cumulatively is going to build up, and it's how confident we are in the context of clinical poverty versus financial stability.
Good point.
So,
speak up as well.
So one thing to respond, Ali may want to add. We identified agency as an issue where it is arising in the performance reviews, and a component of the recovery plans that are coming back to us this week sets out the position about the actions that need to be in place to mitigate those issues. And we have a long list of things that have already happened, but which haven't impacted on the agency cost yet. We need to pull all of that together as part of that Q1 review, which is what we will be doing. I don't know. Do you want to add?
Yeah, so it's one of the significant topics for discussion at the pay control group, and certainly yesterday we were just kind of working through. So we have no off framework agencies in use at all in the organisation, and that is something that we expect to continue. We've also working to agree new rate cards for our medical workforce that will enable us to kind of align across the PCB as much as we possibly can do, but also give us the opportunity to make sure that we are competitive and able to fill those shifts. But there is significant scrutiny on the agency profiles, and each of the care groups. This is part of the reason why they've been asked to identify their workforce plans, because what we're going to need to very quickly identify is if there isn't a sustainable workforce option here for us in terms of removing that kind of reliance on agency expenditure, then we need to have some different conversations around how we reconfigure the workforce or how we reconfigure services. So all of that will be kind of built into the process that's being kind of done at the moment around kind of looking at those high agency, high cost areas where we've got that temporary workforce reliance. So I think it's a challenge, and I don't think we kind of shy away from that. One of the other challenges is that the agency reduction plans are very highly reliant on reducing the number of patients in the organisation who don't meet the medical criteria to reside, and therefore there's a system approach that needs to be pulled in here to make this work, particularly as we move into winter. So it's stuff that we're doing internally around pay control arrangements, but there's also some more transformational things that we're picking up as part of the programme as well.
I'm gonna, before I bring in, just ask Tabitha, are you responding to that point as well, Tabitha?
Yes. I just wanted to add that at the back of it, from the quality and patient safety sort of review, we've strengthened our establishment reviews, and I won't go into detail because we have the biannual safer staffing, which kind of triangulates some of the work we're doing. I just wanted to mention that the establishment reviews as well help us to see where there is at least like the establishment is right, or where there are gaps, or just to put it.
We've got that later in the agenda.
We have, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Tony, that's fine.
Yes, I was particularly hearing about because you have to get to the fundamental, is it fit for purpose? And from a previous life, I've got to be careful what I'm saying, but it's about how everything is administered. It's interesting, sometimes I'm not saying here, but you get peaks and troughs at certain times of the year. And it's about the enhancements and the systems and agencies. It's a real challenge, but it's the way it's running. It's a bit overheating, so it's kind of, it needs to be pulled back. Otherwise, it's with all the other financials going to be a bit of a challenge.
Thank you. Yeah, just responding to your challenge and words of caution to us, Mike. I think that reiterates the importance for us to have that session around understanding the infrastructure that's in place and the people and the skills and such like that are in place to support the continuous improvement that we need and to keep these going in the right direction. I just think that will give us the assurance that I think quite often people are asking about, because we don't actually fully understand those systems and things are in place. So that session, I think, is of real importance for us.
Yeah. A unitary board, so executives and non-executives jointly, hip to hip, make decisions together. They're responsible for those decisions together, but equally the non-exec directors recognise the expertise in the executive group. In many ways rely on you to provide us with the data that we can then triangulate for assurance purposes. Thank you for the work.
Colleagues, are we happy to note and accept the performance? Chris, thank you. All the executives, as always, thank you. Could you pass our thanks on? I know you'll have teams behind you that plough on and dig into this data and prepare it for the board. So thank you for that. So we know the contents of the report. 51.2 minutes and 3A reports. I say this every month, forgive me. So we'll ask the chairs of the committee then. We know you've done the business. We know you've been around and rooting around in the roots. Bring to the board issues of assurance. Okay. I said something there to amuse you. I don't know. Karen, audit, please.
Yeah, thank you. So taking that on board on behalf of Liz, I think it's self-explanatory, largely can be taken as read, but just to highlight that the Audit Committee on behalf of the board approved the annual report and accounts for 22-23 and that they have now been uploaded to the NHS England portal. Just of note, in particularly the Audit Committee were really mindful of the impact of the late adjustments to the account and the system financial position, and committed to ensure that that was reflected on for 23-24 going forwards. And then in terms of assurance, the internal audit opinion was one of substantial assurance, with good systems of internal controls that are generally being applied consistently. So
good.
Those are the highlights from Liz.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Fix that.
Only for 2 seconds, Chair. I just want to put on record personal thanks and hopefully the board support thanks for Chris, Helen, Jane Stanley and the team under real pressure at year end, including the complexities of the reopening and closing of the accounts, and still to get them in on time with a clean audit and substantial assurance on internal audit controls is some feat, actually, because there's now days and weeks to do that, not the months that I used to enjoy when I was a nipper in finance. So just to put on record, personal thanks and board thanks, Chair, for that team.
Thank you. Formally record. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, Karen, you're still on finance and performance, please.
Thank you. Finance and performance, most of what is highlighted in there we've already heard through the board, but I think particularly just to highlight that given in the context of the ongoing discussions around the financial plan and longer term financial sustainability that Chris highlighted earlier, the committee particularly noted the importance of the trust continuing to focus on its plans and its delivery of its plans, and the continued focus on the improvement programme and transition arrangements from recovery support. So in the context of those financial challenges, the focus for the trust remains the same. That was an important point. Just to highlight to the board, colleagues will remember the shift to a dynamic purchasing model for gas. The committee recommended approved a recommendation to delegate authority to the energy group to purchase winter gas at the best price, and also approve the recommendation to migrate the current electricity contract to the same dynamic purchasing model. So those are the two key points from alerts. Everything else that we have already covered, except to highlight that we welcomed a new report that we will start to take monthly going forwards against delivery of the elective activity plan. So additional assurance around the elective activity plan. Other than that, we can take that as read.
Thanks, colleagues. Okay, then on to quality committee. Sarah.
Thank you. We've covered quite a lot of detail elsewhere on the agenda, so just to pick up a couple that are under the alert section related to maternity, Helm Chase was still closed to births at the time of quality committee and was awaiting a decision to reopen, and Tabitha has just confirmed to me it opens on Monday.
It opened on Monday.
Opened on Monday, so it's now open, so that's great news. Obviously work is ongoing around relocating appointments for community maternity appointments, working with both the space utilisation group and also looking at the impact on patients and potential risks to patients who are then not seen. It may be further to travel, for example, so that's being considered. And then just in terms of assurance, the committee confirmed closure of recommendation 35 from the niche recommendations, so that was excellent. And we confirmed that we'd receive a quarterly update to quality committee on the sustainability of niche recommendations. And we also reviewed and approved the trust's quality account for 22-23, which will now be published on the website.
Thank you. Any questions to quality? Get the reports. Brilliant. Thank you. No people for this month. So it's 11:25, colleagues. Shall we have a 10-minute break? Reconvene at 11:35.
Keep it on that.